everybody. Happy Friday. So, we are actually recording this on Thursday. The first thing I want to say is happy birthday to my podcast partner, Stephanie.
Thank you.
And it's also,
Sharing it on a sad day for our
yeah,
country.
yeah, it is also D Day as we're recording this. And so, I would hope everyone knows what D Day is, but if you don't, it's basically this is the 80th anniversary today to basically like commemorate the Allied invasion, which started on the beaches of Normandy and helped defeat the Nazis and end the war. And before we dive into today's podcast, I would love to take this opportunity to point out how Biden continues to completely embarrass our nation and disrespect our veterans. He is in France, in Normandy, and he's supposed to give a speech for D Day. And I have a friend here in the Czech Republic who is actually in Normandy right now, and he's there. Um, he's spent the past few days like meeting with all of these veterans, and it's just really cool. But he was super excited for Biden to come and give a speech at in Normandy, and he's a Biden supporter. And even though I've tried to sway him to the truth, he is a European, so supporting Biden. But anyway, um, he sends me this text and he's like, Biden's 15 minutes late already. And I said, like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, maybe he needs to go to the bathroom. And I said, I think they're just waiting for his adrenaline to kick in before they can bring him on stage. And then he texts me again and he's like, well, now it's been 30 minutes and his helicopter landed. He's like, this is embarrassing. Like, these veterans have been waiting 90 minutes already for Biden to come out, and it's hot and sunny and there's medics here. He's like, this is so disrespectful. And I said, yeah, this is Biden. I'm like, this is basically showing you what he thinks of our veterans. And like, you wonder why I don't like the guy, right? And he's like, I can see if maybe he was like 5 or 10 minutes late, but it's been 35 minutes.
Maybe he couldn't find the stage.
I know, I know. And so then he says, okay, it started. And then he texts me again and he goes, he can't even walk.
Yeah.
He's he's so slow. And I said, I guarantee he has worse dementia than any of the veterans who are there for D-Day.
Well, how many times has he been on stage and then he like won't even look at the people he's supposed to be there for, like because he's so confused. Like
Yeah,
he'll address like the Secret Service instead of like the veterans. Like he's just it's a mess. But yeah, welcome to the shit show, everyone. Like that's what we
right.
deal with here all the time. That's really
Yeah,
disrespectful though to
it
leave. I
is.
mean, that's especially for like people in their 80s to travel all that way and then sit outside in the heat. Like that's awful. Show some respect, you know?
Yeah, he sent me pictures, and there's like all of these, very elderly veterans in wheelchairs there. And like, this is such a huge event. It's the 80th anniversary. And I asked him, I said, did like they give any reason for why Biden is late? And they're like, he said, nope, nothing at all. And I guess maybe it was Blinken or someone else is also supposed to speak. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry that you're being subjected to this.
Yeah,
But
that's ridiculous. Isn't it the movie Saving Private Ryan that was all about D-Day? Like, and it was that scene where it showed the beaches of Normandy. Like,
yeah.
I think it was that movie, and it was so sad. Like that movie lives in my head every time that it's D-Day. I like think about that, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So yeah, what a asshole for leaving those veterans waiting. He is,
Yeah, and I can't imagine the speech is going well, but obviously we're recording this before he's even speaking, so I can't give any comment as to how poor the speech went, but I can only imagine it's not going to be good.
yeah.
But anyway, that is not even our topic for today. Today we are going to be talking about Project 2025. Stephanie, have you heard of this?
I have. I've heard of it on social media, but for this episode, this was the first time I really started like trying to dive into this gigantic document. It was like 900 pages.
Yeah. Yeah. I really didn't know much about it until I started seeing articles come across my news feed, like for the last week and a half or so. And the titles were things like calling it a terrifying right wing manifesto, a chilling subversion of democracy, and an existential danger to America. So, of course, this piqued my interest because whenever the left talks about subverting democracy, it's usually a very rational idea that threatens their agenda. And I thought maybe it was some kind of conspiracy theory at first, but it's not. It's an actual plan to reshape the US federal government, and it's pretty radical. But I think we need radical at this point because our government is a totally corrupt clown show. And like, if you guys haven't heard, Project 2025 is also called the Presidential Transition Project. And I guess it's been in the works since 2022. It was initially organized by the Heritage Foundation. They're a conservative think tank, and you can read all about it on their website, which is project2025.org. Or if you want a briefer breakdown, just go on Wikipedia. But the main idea behind the plan is that we need to clean house and get rid of the deep state, which I completely agree with. It proposes getting rid of funding for the DOJ, dismantling the FBI and DHS, getting rid of Biden's ridiculous environmental and climate change regulations, and going back to fossil fuel production, abolishing the Federal Reserve in favor of a free banking system, eliminating the Department of Commerce, and getting rid of a ton of the other three-letter agencies like the FCC and the FTC, getting rid of DEI programs and the Department of Education, and withdrawing from the UN, all of which I am completely on board with.
So far, I'm on board with all of it. And as you're reading that, I'm like, oh my God, that is a lot of the same stuff that Vivek talked about. I know
Yeah.
he was like, we're going to completely get rid of the FBI, the Department of Education, and he had a really solid plan for what he would do. So reading that, it's making me wonder, like, maybe that's going to be the VP pick. I don't know. But if it is, he would be the type that would get all of this done.
Oh, he would be an amazing VP pick. And what a team. That'd be an amazing team. And
Mhm.
this plan also covers like a total overhaul of our immigration system, which we also absolutely need. And the only thing that I really don't agree with is their stance on banning abortion and emergency contraception. But this project is basically being organized by mostly right wing Christian conservatives. So this focus doesn't surprise me. I've said this before and I will say it again. If Republicans could just drop the abortion issue, they would get more votes and liberal Democrats literally wouldn't have a leg to stand on. Like, this is always one of Biden's main talking points that wins him favor with women and the libtards. And this whole narrative that Trump and the right want to take away women's rights. Like, I'm tired of it. Republicans need to let this agenda go. And it should not even be a federal issue to begin with, but I'm totally getting sidetracked. Um, the concept for Project 2025 was developed in collaboration with like 100 different partners. You've got Turning Point USA, the Conservative Partnership Institute, Moms for Liberty, and other organizations and companies that have close ties to Trump or that are being led by former Trump staffers and officials. But the project itself does not specifically promote Trump or any other particular presidential candidate. However, you wouldn't know that if you just like focused on mainstream media because every single article that I read referred to Project 2025 as Trump's plan to destroy democracy if he gets elected. And these are all recent articles. Like, I've been seeing this stuff for the past couple weeks, even though this project has been ongoing for a couple years. So it's clearly being used as a scare tactic as we get closer to the election to get the libtards freaked out about Trump. And Stephanie, like, have you actually heard or seen anything about Trump saying he's going to implement Project 2025 if he's elected? Because I've heard he has a plan called Agenda 47 or something like that that's similar to Project 2025, but I haven't seen him say at all that, this is his project.
Yeah, I haven't heard it come from his mouth either. And that's the thing with anything we're hearing. That is why I like social media because you can go and find clips and listen from the horse's mouth. Like I want to hear from Trump what he's going to do, not from, some conservative organization. I was able to find an interview with James Bacon, and he was Trump's director of presidential personnel when Trump was in office. And he explained what he thinks the relation is to Trump and like how Trump is even involved with this. So I'm going to play a clip so we can kind of hear the background of it.
So Project 2025 is kind of the culmination of the MAGA Republicans' battle with the establishment. We need to get the right people into the next administration during the transition period so that we can be ready on day one to be implementing the MAGA agenda. Basically, what 2025 does is it recruits, vets, and sorts into positions all of the people we need to take over the next administration and make it run well. So we're getting people from outside of the Beltway, and we're vetting them, and we're interviewing them so that we can be ready. We don't have time to waste when we get in next time. And the Heritage Foundation is leading this. They've got together a coalition of conservative groups. We're building a personnel database that is going to be live very soon. And you can go to project2025.org to sign up if you want to serve in the next administration. That's project2025.org.
Okay, so that right there, the fact that he's putting it out there to the nation of, hey, if you want to serve and you want to, basically apply for the Trump White House or whatever, go on this website. That's a good sign that they truly are, trying to root out the deep state. So that's what he's laying it out as. He's saying this is basically a personnel plan, like an HR plan type of thing to remove the deep state, which needs to happen.
So a list of all the people that the left will basically persecute if Trump doesn't get elected.
Right. So like obviously the left is freaking out because they know like all their little people that have their tentacles and everything will be removed, which is great. Like who doesn't want that? I mean, we know that the entire country is for term limits, and you know what I mean? So this is like kind of the beginning of that is what I think. It's a plan to quickly, drain the swamp and build an effective team. And like he said, we have to start doing this on day one. You can't take your time with it because we saw what happened in Trump's first term where, he didn't really go in and just start firing people. So that seems to be how the Trump team sees it. I don't even know if this guy is still associated with Trump. He was just someone that worked for Trump's White House. But that's what he lays it out as, a personnel plan. But then, as you said, Tara, the Heritage Foundation has gone above and beyond that and drafted this 900-page plan. And we damn well know Trump isn't going to leave his entire presidency up to a conservative bureaucratic organization. Like he doesn't bow down to anyone, not any group or plan. So while I'm sure he's going to consider bits and pieces of this plan, for example, the abortion thing, he's already publicly stated that banning abortion is unreasonable and should be left to the states. So he's not in agreement on that. He's a big proponent of less federal government control and regulations and in favor of leaving most of these decisions up to the states. And that's exactly what he did with COVID. He let each state decide how to handle the pandemic. A lot of people are mad at him for that. I still think that's the way our country is supposed to be. And like, just think about that for a second. All of these people on the left that want to say that he's this crazy dictator. Well, does a dictator, what do they want? They want power and control. He gave up that power and control to the states. He let the governors make the decisions for their individual states. And there were, far left governors like Cuomo and Newsom and Whitmer that went off the deep end, and he could have easily overrode them or, dictated how to handle things, but he didn't. And in my opinion, that's like the most moderate thing a president can do. So that to me, that just destroys their whole narrative of what they say Trump is. And that's really how our country was set up. It was never set up to be one big bad government telling the people what to do. It was always supposed to be the states making the decisions on these issues like abortion, and the federal government is there, to help with national security and the economy. Personally, I agree with that. And not to get us like derailed again, but just back to the abortion thing really quick, because that's going to be the one point that Biden's going to bring up in these debates.
Oh, yeah.
Trump has said for years that Roe v. Wade should be overturned, so that the decision can go back to the states. He never said it should be overturned so we can ban abortion. He said it should be overturned and it should go to the states. It never should have left the states. That is a state decision. Um, and he's outright said he doesn't want it banned. He said that there will not be a federal ban. He was even asked about, I think it was Oklahoma that was putting a ban in, and he said he thinks that they'll come to a more reasonable conclusion, meaning a ban is not reasonable. So, like, they can say he's going to ban abortion and all this and implement Project 2025, but Trump isn't going to hand over that much power to an organization. I mean, that's absurd. I think he'll do exactly what he said he'll do. He'll be a dictator for one day, meaning his first day in office, he's cleaning house. He is firing the deep state. And, people a lot of times will bring up, well, why didn't he do that in the first term? Because it was his first term. He had to get reelected. Like, could you imagine how the media would have reacted if he went in with this plan in his first term? Like, there's no way. But now that things have gotten so bad and the deep state corruption has been exposed, it's right there for every American to see. And like, there's all these hearings, but no accountability. I think this is the time where he can go in and make them accountable on day one. And since things are so bad, Americans are going to cheer him on. I mean, yeah, you'll have the left media calling him a dictator, but the people of America are going to cheer him on. And I say get rid of as many lifelong politicians as you can. I don't care if they're right. I don't care if they're left. I don't care if they're center. Get them out and clean house.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like, the whole thing with like term limits in Congress, the fact that we don't have any is absolutely insane to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I just have to point out some of the shit I've read just for the sake of comedy, Stephanie. So the Daily Montanan published an article yesterday, and they had this very dramatic, lengthy breakdown of how Project 2025 was specifically created for Trump to destroy democracy. And he's going to do this by, quote, banning books and suppressing any curriculum that discusses the evils of slavery, banning abortion, which makes women second-class citizens, and forcing would-be immigrants to be detained in concentration camps, end quote. There was an article in Raw Story that talked about how intelligence and national security officials are deeply alarmed because Trump is going to use Project 2025 so that he can staff the government with MAGA loyalists and spies, and then force intelligence officers to do unethical and illegal operations. There was an article that came out today in a publication called Two Paragraphs, and the title was Judge Eileen Cannon Allows Project 2025 Contributor to Speak at Trump Hearing. And then the article itself had nothing to do with Project 2025, and it merely mentioned that one of the lawyers who's presenting an oral argument is a contributor to the Heritage Foundation. But obviously the title of that article is meant to like inspire and instill fear in people. An article came out on Tuesday in The Nation that said, quote, Donald Trump has made no secret of his determination to govern as a dictator if he regains the presidency. But Trump and his allies are too smart to go full Kim Jong-un, end quote. And then the article goes into like equally dramatic details about how Trump admires Putin and wants the same kind of authoritarian power, and he'll destroy any possibility of fair elections. And if he controls the FCC, there's going to be media censorship, and he wants to undermine civil society, and he's going to use Project 2025 to weaponize the DOJ. And it was so comical reading this because the author basically laid out every fucking thing that the left is already doing. He even cited propaganda from the left-wing group Project Democracy and quoted from their report called The Authoritarian Playbook. And it said, quote, the biggest innovation of 21st century authoritarians has been to maintain the facade of democratic elections while at the same time tilting the rules against their opponents. They do this by suppressing votes and biasing, distorting, falsifying, or even overturning the results, either through capturing referees or by manipulating the electoral rules in their favor, end quote. Like, hello, Biden admin, right?
I was literally thinking that. Like, this is what is happening right now under the Biden administration. It's been this way the whole time, everything that they said that Trump was going to do, Biden ended up doing. Like, who has been censored for the past 4 years? And even more than 4 years, anyone on the right. Anyone that said anything about the vaccine or questioned the COVID narrative, anyone who questions election integrity to this day, anyone who, God forbid, is against war. But like, it is funny seeing all the misinformation. I hate that word, but seeing it on TikTok. Like, people are literally making up crazy ass shit about this Project 2025. Like, one guy was like, this is going to put autistic children in institutions. It literally does not say that anywhere. Like, it doesn't use the word autistic or autism or institutions anywhere in the 900 pages. Like, nothing about that is even mentioned, but he says that, and that doesn't get censored. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so obvious who's really getting censored. What it does say in Project 2025 is it talks about school choice and giving parents cash to decide which schools and programs are best for their child instead of giving all this power to the Department of Education that clearly hasn't worked. Since the Department of Education's been in place, like, no metrics have improved. Not one single metric. It's crazy. But it is funny and comical. Like, I was really laughing looking up information for this episode because there's just so many absurd stories that are out there, and the posts are still up. The only ones that are getting censored are the ones on the right. When I say that, I mean, I literally could not find a right-wing video on Project 2025 on TikTok. And that's after their guidelines, because I saw a lot of stuff before May 17th, and now it's all gone. So then I go and I start searching all of the different search engines. Every article that came up was a far left news organization, every single one of them. And I mean, trust me, I tried. I really, really tried. But all you see is leftist propaganda when searching now. And it's no surprise they did this during the last election as well. So it was hard to prepare for this episode when you only get the viewpoints of the left, and most of that is blatant lies. And so at the end of it, I found myself on X, and that's where I could actually find a little bit of information and viewpoints from the right. But it's like, it's clear where the censorship is happening. And it's just so funny. They're saying that Trump's going to try to censor people when that is all that this administration has done.
Yeah, I mean, that's what drew my attention to it in the first place, was seeing all of these left-wing articles, calling it terrifying. And it wasn't until I went on the website and actually started looking into the program that I got an idea of what it was. And one of the things I find interesting about it is that this program has it's a 180-day playbook. It's like a manual that can be implemented during the first 6 months of whatever conservative president gets elected. And it's basically like a transition plan so that each federal agency is like taken apart in this whole plan, and it's how to get the country back on track in a short time frame. They have a very comprehensive 400-page book called Mandate for Leadership: The Conservative Promise. You can buy it, or you can just go online and you can read it for free. It outlines every step of the action plan, and like I said, it's very comprehensive. It was put together by a group of conservative policy experts, former elected officials, economists, veterans from prior administrations. And again, it's pretty radical, and I haven't read the entire thing, but from the parts that I did read, I love the fact that it's laid out step by step, and it tells you point blank exactly what the plan of action is for basically every government agency and how they would change things. And I have a lot of respect for this, because we always hear these platitudes from the left about transparency, transparency, transparency. But is the left ever truly transparent? No. Everything is lies and manipulation, or vague answers, or, KJP style, no answers at all. And at least with this plan, it tells you exactly what they want to do. It's not just a word salad about how the opposition is the threat to democracy. It's a legitimate blueprint that lays out specific actions that will be implemented and the time frame for how it will take place.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, like, how many times it's pretty much every time there is a spending bill or any massive change in our government, and they get in 1,000-page document like hours before they're supposed to vote.
Right.
This is 900 pages or 400, whatever, depending on where you look. You've had years now. I mean, I think they first put this out, what, like a year or two ago? So it's like, clearly there's one side that's trying to be transparent here, and you actually have months and months and months to look through every facet of this before it even gets to anything, that would be voted on. So yeah, like it's obviously there's one party that's trying to be transparent.
Yeah, and it's not just for Congress or the government to read this. Anybody can go online and read this entire plan. It's available to the public. And again, like that's fucking transparency. But Stephanie, I do want to ask you something. Like this plan has a basis in the idea of unitary executive theory. And so their recommendation is to basically place the executive branch of the federal government under direct presidential control. What do you think about that?
So I was looking into this because I was a little confused on it, to be honest. But in the Project 2025, it says, quote, in its opening words, Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution makes it abundantly clear that the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. That enormous power is not vested in departments or agencies, in staff or administrative bodies, in non-governmental organizations or other equities and interests close to the government. And I agree, like that we've gotten so far away from that. When you look at how things are run right now, there's so much bureaucracy from unelected officials, and they have far too much power, especially looking at the Biden White House. And if they haven't gone to such great lengths to like get Trump, I don't even think we'd be having this conversation.
Yeah.
But I do think it's needed at this point, because if we really want to clean out the deep state military industrial complex, we need the president to have control of the executive branch, which is exactly what our Constitution calls for. So I agree with that. But like, does that also mean what Shipwreck was saying about like getting rid of Congress? Because that I don't really agree with that. I think you need term limits, but I don't think you just get rid of Congress. So I'm not really clear on that.
Yeah, and again, I didn't read the entire 900 pages or the 400-page playbook, but I don't recall seeing anything directed at Congress.
Yeah. And I think the simple fix for that is term limits, if that's even possible. Like they're never going to vote on that. So is it possible to use this power of
But
the
they
president?
shouldn't be voting on that. We should be fucking voting on that.
Yes. Yes. And what's happening now are people that we never voted for are calling all the shots. And I think that's
Yeah.
what they mean. Like we need to get back to the president has control in that branch of government. Like I don't understand why that's a problem. You know what I mean? Um, and then another thing, like this is probably the biggest thing that I've been seeing left and right that people are complaining about, is that this would cut government spending. But what, like, why is anyone against this? So we spend $1.7 trillion more than we take in every year. Like we can't keep doing that. So yeah, like we need an aggressive spending cut. And it just boggles my mind that, people get upset, but I mean, they get upset because Tara, like that wouldn't fund the pride parades in the Czech Republic then. So I mean, we can't have that.
Exactly. Like you look at how many government jobs are useless.
Yeah.
I mean, a good portion of government jobs
Hmm.
are just completely fucking useless and we could do away with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so another thing that the left is going crazy over is they're saying that this would remove language around gender identity. And what it actually says is that public institutions and public officials cannot declare superiority or inferiority based on race, sex, religion, etc. To me, that sounds super inclusive. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think that you should be able to say that one is superior and one is inferior. But of course, they want to say that cisgender people are inferior to, the 200 different genders. And let's be real, like if the left didn't go so far to the point that women are being discriminated against in sports, cisgender is first of all, even a thing, but that they are getting discriminated against. Masculinity is under attack. If they didn't go that far, then again, like this wouldn't even be an issue. If they wouldn't have injected this stuff into schools and pushed kids like into this community that's all about sexual orientation, then I don't even think there would be a discussion about this. But it's like the LGBTQ community is their own worst enemy. And this administration, I know I'm getting off into the weeds just a little bit, but it's important to talk about because I feel like they have set us back decades where people went from being very accepting and open to the LGBTQ community to now everyone has their guard up. And that means we've gone backwards. So maybe not focusing on sexual orientation and race 24/7 and gender identity would get us back to a time where we judged people on their character and viewed people as people instead of highlighting our differences and creating this whole like us versus them mentality. And it reminds me of that video where Morgan Freeman was on like 60 Minutes and the interviewer asked him what he thought of Black History Month. And he's like, I don't like it. If people would stop talking about race, it would solve the problem of racism. He said, if I stop calling you a white man and you stop calling me a Black man, then it doesn't exist. Like the reason why it's still around is because you constantly have to bring it up. So tying this back to Project 2025, like let's just think about that. In the last 4 years, where we've injected gender identity, race, sexual orientation into every facet of life, and we've put a gazillion labels on everyone, do you think that that has united us more and made us less hateful and more accepting of one another? Or have we become more divided than ever? Like, obviously, we're more divided than ever. So maybe they're on to something with removing all this language, remove all the labels around identity and diversity and inclusion, and instead just get back to treating everyone equal. It's all an equal, clean slate. We're all American citizens, and let's treat everyone as such. Like, that just seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like the DEI gender identity shit has just gotten so out of control. And on top of that, it's done nothing but contribute to intolerance from the left. And we're creating like several generations of weak people who can't function in normal society without being catered to. Like this shit needs to stop.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I'm not afraid to say it. Like, it's just, it's common sense, you know? So again, like the whole theme that the left is going with is that Trump is going to be some war hungry evil dictator, which is just hilarious because it's like all you have to do is open your eyes and see who the real party of war is. Because under Trump, it's the only time in my lifetime that we didn't go and bomb other countries and start new conflicts. Instead, we had peace deals. And there was a Tim Pool interview at the Libertarian Convention with Trump, and it was a great interview. And of course, I had to work for hours to try to find clips because it's freaking censored everywhere. But Tim asked Trump about North Korea, and he said, "You're the first president ever to cross enemy lines into North Korea unprotected." So I want to play a clip of Trump's answer because I think it proves like who the real leader of peace is and who the real warmongers are. Let me make sure I have the right one here.
Part of my family comes from Korea. Good. And you did what I think is one of the most tremendous things. You crossed the demilitarized zone into North Korea with no security as a sign of goodwill and peace with the hostile nation. And I've had people tell me it never happened. So I think people need to know about it. I'm wondering if you can just tell me how did that happen? How did it come to be?
And it hasn't happened since.
Yeah.
And when I met with the handoff, you sort of meet with the previous president for a period of time. The meeting lasted for quite a while. With President Obama, you sit in the Oval Office and you talk, and the press is outside, and you talk for a little while. He said the single greatest threat we have is North Korea. And I said, have you called them? Have you tried to talk to them? Little things like that. And didn't matter what the answer was. He felt that was the single biggest threat in the world was North Korea. And as you know, there was certain hostility when I first started, and all of a sudden it boiled down to something that was very beautiful, the way it happened. And I got along with him very well. And I will say that if Hillary won that race, you would have had a nuclear war and millions of people would have been killed. And you weren't even close to that. It never happened. It was never going to happen. I got along great with him, and it just never was going to happen.
I got one big question for you.
Okay, so the reason I wanted to play that clip is because I don't know, like our memory is so short. I don't think people remember that before Trump was in office, there was a real fear of North Korea. Like they were constantly threatening a nuclear war. And he went there in person against advice from all of his security and put himself like in the enemy zone, and he created peace. It was the first time in my life that I could remember, probably the first time since I was born, that North Korea was not like threatening to bomb us. And so it's like, yeah, that's not something a warmonger does. So then the other part of the interview, Tim Pool asked him about World War III because obviously, like, it's a real threat. So I want to play his response for that because I think that keeping us out of war and closing the border are the two biggest things that we should be concerned about when choosing a president in November. So let me play that clip real quick.
Foreign policy, perhaps is a little bit of a biased interview, but I think you're the greatest president of my lifetime.
I appreciate it.
And ending the wars that we should not have been involved in. Now the fear is World War III.
Yeah.
What are you looking at when you enter your next term to stopping the escalation?
Well, first of all, I'm the only one that is going to stop World War III because this man can't put two sentences together. He doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know where he is. And amazingly, it seems like he's going to be running. You know, it's a lot of people say, do you think he'll make it to the starting gate? Well, we'll see what happens. But if you look at Viktor Orban, because we don't want to see wars, I don't want to see wars. I was in no wars other than we finished a war with ISIS and we completed it, 100% complete. But I don't want to see wars. I think it's so horrible, so unnecessary, so costly in terms of lives and money in that order. And destroying these countries, you know, you're destroying culture. When you look at Ukraine, that would have never happened if I were president. You look at the October 7th attack on Israel, would have never happened.
Well, I look at your policies, I see secure the borders, bring jobs back. I look at the Democrats and many Republicans, and it's foreign war and foreign expansion.
That's right.
What is that?
I think it's just a failed mentality. It's crazy. You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see recently they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do that. You can talk in such a way where they respect you and they listen to you. Viktor Orban of Hungary, you know, the leader, they call him a strong man. Who cares if he's a strong man or not a strong man? He's a very powerful guy. He said the problem the world has is that Donald Trump is no longer president. When he was president, China didn't play around, Russia didn't play around, nobody played around, and we had no problems. Today, the whole world is on fire.
Okay, so two things, Tara. Number one, hasn't he like toned it down so much?
That's exactly what I was thinking when you were playing that clip, was like, wow, he sounds so calm and collected and like very presidential in my mind.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's like it really doesn't matter what he says or Biden says. He's pointing out, like, look at what happened when I was in office versus when Biden was in office. We get to see the actual results of two presidents. And like, how could you even say at this point that we wouldn't be safer and less likely to be in war with Trump versus Biden? I have to play one more clip because it was just too good. Like, it was such a good interview. But this clip is his actual plan on deporting the illegals and closing the border, because this was my big question. I'm like, 20 million illegals in the country. At this point, hope is lost. There's no way you're going to be able to find them and deport them. Oh, yes, he has a plan. So here it is.
Large deportation effort in your next term. How do we do it?
So millions and millions of people are coming into a country, and it's not necessarily exactly what we want or had in mind. They have open borders where people just flow in, and many of those people are coming from prisons. Many of those people, frankly, are murderers and they're drug dealers, and they're coming from mental institutions, and they're coming from places that are not going to work very well. It's not going to be very good for our country. So we're going to start with that, and we have to get them out. No country can sustain what we're going through. I believe the number is 15, 16 million, could even be 17 million people right now.
Is that?
That's more than almost, that's bigger than almost all of our states.
I think it's freaking out young people. Do we? How do we do it though? I mean, is it going to be new personnel? Do we?
It will really be done with local police. You know, the respect has been taken away. The honor has been taken away from our police forces. They're not allowed to do anything. And whether it's libertarian or not libertarian, people have to have, you have to have law and order. You can't have 500 people walking into a department store and just walking out with everything they have. And we have to give honor and respect back. And I believe immunity, because, you know, so often when a police person does their job, they end up with no pension. They end up with no house. They end up with no family. Everything's taken away from them. They have to get their own lawyer. So we're going to give them back their dignity and their strength. The local police know the criminals that we're talking about. They know their first name, their middle name, and their last name. They know everything about them. And we're going to have to let them do that. And they will bring them in. We have no choice. And these are in many cases, and this is from all over the world, not just South America, which is big enough, but they're coming in from the Congo. They're coming in from all parts of Africa. They're coming in from all parts of Asia. And it's an invasion into our country, and no country can handle this. So we're going to have them taken out. Local police, we're going to work very closely with the local police, and it's been done before. We had Dwight Eisenhower, believe it or not, did the biggest deportation. He pretty much stopped it. Strange that we mentioned Eisenhower because you don't think of him that way, but he did a massive deportation where people.
Okay, so many things. So first of all, I didn't know that Eisenhower had a mass deportation,
I
but
didn't
he
either.
did, and now he's using his playbook. So I have to ask you, since you were in law enforcement, what do you think of that? Like, do you think the police, if they were given the power and immunity, like, hey, go get all of the illegal citizens in your jurisdiction, could they do it? Do they know where they are? Like, is this a feasible plan? What do you think?
I think from a local standpoint, like law enforcement is able to detain, but my experience was you would detain and then you would call ICE, which is
Mhm.
immigration control. And then ICE would be the ones that would actually handle the deportation. So I don't know if that's what they're
Right.
talking about or if they're
I think
talking
it
about,
is. So,
okay,
like, okay, so the guy that used to be the head of ICE is like, they want to get back to doing their jobs the correct way. But I think the problem is that, like, people are saying, well, how are you going to find all of these? Like, if there's 20 million people, how do you
not
even know
hard.
where they're at? They've probably gotten fake IDs, blah, blah, blah. So he's saying, well, the local police, like, they will be able to find them. Like, they know where they're at. And I don't know if that's true or not, but he seems to think it's true.
We used to do stuff like that where we would have, especially when it came to gang activity, we would serve warrants, like major warrants, and you would get all of these gangsters, many of whom were illegal in the country, and you would run them and find out their background. And then ICE would always be there, like a huge task force, and we would be like, okay, here's all the people that are not here legally, and ICE would take it from there. So I think it's possible. I don't know that you could really get every illegal in the country,
Well,
especially if
yeah.
people, have changed their names. But when it comes down to not just ID, but when they go through fingerprinting and everything else, it doesn't matter what name they give if their fingerprints show them in the database as being a prior arrested criminal from, wherever. So I think it's definitely feasible to at least get a good portion of the illegals out of the country.
Well, and that's a good point. Like, get the criminal illegals, because if they
Yeah.
commit a crime and they're in the database, like, there you go. So, listening to that, I felt the most hopeful I have in a long time, because my thought was, even if he gets in, the damage is already done. Well, no, he's saying, like, we can actually deport the people that aren't supposed to be here, that are draining, all these resources and committing crimes and all the other types of things that are going on. So I thought, like, that was a good thing to list. And I think it also shows, like, he has a clear, very clear plan of what he wants. Project 2025, my opinion is that it's not going to dictate how he runs the White House or the country. I think it's exactly what that James Bacon said. It's a personnel plan for
Yeah.
getting rid of the deep state, draining the swamp. That's my take on it. And that's, whatever, like that's just an opinion. But just looking at it as a whole, like obviously Biden can't win on any issues of substance, like the border or protecting us from war or improving the economy. So they're going to keep focusing on state issues like abortion and LGBTQ, whatever policies. Um, and that's why they're going to keep bringing up Project 2025, because it's the only evidence that they have that could even come close to a federal ban on abortion, despite Trump saying he won't ban it. So, like, I really feel like they're grasping at straws. It's all a distraction tactic. And we have to keep like reminding people that having gender books in school or 9-month abortions isn't as important as keeping all of us, gay, trans, straight, white, black, you name it, keeping all of us safe and from being killed in war. It's making sure that our children can afford homes and have jobs one day. That is more important than their gender identity at age 10. And if people could just look at it from that viewpoint, it could make a difference in how they vote.
Yeah,
That's my
I
take.
agree. Well said. And I just have to give a little update because my friend texted me while we were recording.
Yeah.
And he said it was actually a clear 20-minute speech. And I said, oh, then he was definitely drugged. And he said, maybe. He's just too old. And he said, he's just doing what he's told, but he is your president. And I said, you're correct. He's doing what he's told, but that's because he's mentally incompetent to make decisions. And a president shouldn't be like that. And then he said, America has how big of a population? How are you not able to find at least one good candidate?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Well,
So there you go.
there we go. Interesting. Well, yeah, he was definitely pumped with adrenaline then. That's
Yeah.
okay,
If
great.
he spoke clearly for 20 minutes, absolutely. And that's
Yeah,
why
they
it
were
took so
waiting
long
for the
for him to
drugs to
get.
kick in.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Oh my gosh. Well, as always, share this episode, get it out there. Let's educate people before they go and vote in November. And thank you guys for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll see you back here Monday.